right, hello and welcome to another edition of Lunch and Learn, sponsored by ITS and HR. We've got another great set of content for us today. We've got a couple topics. We're going to go later in the program, I guess, to Dustin Usher, and he's going to give us some education on phishing, and not the kind of phishing with a fishing pole and a worm on the end of a hook. The security type of phishing. But we're going to start out today talking about competency-based education. And we have with us today Dr. Ted Wendel. Dr. Wendel is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning. And to his right, I believe, is Dr. Danielle Kempton. And Danielle is the Director of Behavioral Health for the Physician Assistant Program. And so let's get started on competency-based education. So welcome first.
Good morning.
Hi, guys.
Good morning, afternoon, good lunchtime, I guess, for most people. So let's kind of get going with, tell us a little bit about competency-based education. Let's just start out broad, maybe give us a definition. What is competency-based education?
Well, I think we want to start with a little bit of history. And sitting around last night thinking about this presentation and thinking about the things that dictated how we educate students. And for decades, the way we educated students depended on the resources that we had available. And up until the last 10 years or so, the resource that we had available was a physical facility with classrooms and paper, essentially, and we brought educators into that facility, and that's how we educated students, because that was the resource that made it possible. So, the last 10 to 15 years, we've been able to explore other ways of educating students. And one of the methods that we talk about now is competency-based education. And what we're talking about is basically education that is not bound or defined by time as much as our semester hour education is. It's education that is based on accomplishment and demonstrated achievement of specific skills or knowledges, and it's not classroom based as much as the traditional types of education. Danielle, anything I left out there?
No, I mean, I think that's a pretty good outline of what CBE is. And I think one of the important points to make is that there's no federal definition and certainly no concrete definition of what competency-based education looks like. CBE looks different from institution to institution, from professional program to professional program. So while there are some philosophical foundations for CBE, it certainly isn't a one-size-fits-all prescriptive type of curriculum structure.
Yeah. One of the things that I see getting confused a lot in discussions is outcome-based education and competency-based education. And outcome-based education is really focuses on accomplishing a set of outcomes, obviously, but it can be a traditional classroom-based educational process that arrives at the outcomes. Competency-based education is outcome-based, but divorces itself from classroom, cohort-based approaches.
And I know it's a little bit more aligned with kind of the workforce. And so, Corey, if you want to bring up that little graphic, we kind of have a graphic that talks a little bit about workforce alignment, and then some of the assessments and kind of how it goes about, measuring competency-based education. You want to walk us through that?
Yours. Well, we use this these definitions to help us organize the education. The main thing for us is that we arrive at a set of outcomes that really is based on job performance and job expectations, and we'll talk about our PA certificate program in a few minutes, but essentially what we did was we went to practitioners and said, what are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that you need to do your job? We then constructed a set of outcomes, and from those outcomes, we then divided them into a set of competencies. So, we used the workforce to define the outcomes. We worked with educators to define competencies, and competencies are essentially a statement of accomplishment or a statement of a demonstrated ability. Along the way, we have summative types of assessment that helps a learner assess where they are, and we support a learner with learning activities, but this is learner-centered education. So the onus for achieving the competency is on the learner. It's supported by learning activities, it's supported by mentors, but ultimately a student has to demonstrate their ability as a competency.
Okay. And kind of help us understand what the difference is in terms of the modeling, how you go about creating this type of content that's different from a faculty person who's putting together competency-based education as opposed to more traditional-based education.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so interestingly, you do go about a different process when you're using a competency-based model. We like to talk about this as the backwards design model. So in traditional education, where we provide the student with a number of objectives, we ask them to sit through a number of PowerPoints or engage in a number of learning activities and so on, and then we assess them. In competency-based education, when we design the curriculum, we start with the final assessment. So part of this is sitting down a group of subject matter experts who then can design the competencies, and from those competencies determine what does a student who has mastery of this competency or concept look like, what knowledge, skills, and abilities do they have. So we start with the final summative examination, and then we work our way backwards. So here's where we want you to be at the end. Here are different ways of getting there, and we provide them with opportunities for gathering the pieces of knowledge they need to be successful on the summative, but we don't prescribe to them the format in which these activities will be undertaken. We allow them as adult learners, as self-directed learners, to pursue the learning activities at the pace they choose, in the order they choose. And that really gives them a lot of flexibility and allows them to take ownership of their own education.
Okay, good.
And the other part of this is that it recognizes that not all our students come to us with the same background and experience. And if they understand something, if they already have a competency, all they have to do in competency-based education is demonstrate their competency. They don't have to, in traditional education, they'd sit through a class, they'd spend time, they'd take tests. In competency-based education, all they have to do, if they already have mastery of the subject, is demonstrate it by doing the formative assessment.
And kind of how is this progressing? What does the Department of Education feel about competency-based education, and kind of where are they coming from?
Yeah, we need to recognize a little history. This is not new. This is something that's been around for quite a few years, probably 20, 25, 30 years. Started in community colleges when they recognized that their employers weren't that happy with their graduates because they didn't have the requisite skills for a job as they came out of community colleges. So a number of community colleges went to competency-based education. Not too long ago, in 1997, Western Governors University was actually created as a mandate by, I forget how many Western governors, and they were told that it should be competency-based. It was not to be traditional classroom-based. It was to address the needs of adult learners, to give them the chance to move through material fairly quickly. So Western Governors was really the first higher education institution that's been accredited to do competency-based education. Since then, there are a number of other institutions that have achieved accreditation. The Department of Education struggled with this, and it really revolves around financial aid. The way that we calculate financial aid is often based on a student's credit hour load, and actually in most places the attendance in a class. So competency-based education has been a struggle for the Department of Education. Certainly there have been some institutions that have been less than forthright in how they use financial aid based on competency-based education. But over the last probably 12 to 18 months, the Department of Education has started to work with accrediting bodies to help define the things that they expect in a competency-based educational program.
And from an educational perspective, it's a little bit different in terms of timing as well, right? So you don't have that traditional cohort model going through. It seems like it's more individual-based.
Yeah, one of the tenets of competency-based education is the idea of creating curricula that are self-paced. And so that is one of the challenges with these types of programs is negotiating not only the requirements of the Department of Education in terms of federal financial aid, but also creating collegiality within a class, so to speak, of students, where these students may be engaging with the content online and asynchronously. And so that can be a little bit of a challenge. As Dr. Wendel described, many of these institutions that are engaging in competency-based education programs at this time have had to adjust to meet the requirements, the current requirements of the Department of Education, and that they have assigned credit hour equivalencies in order to provide federal financial aid for their students. There are a number of experimental sites that have been sanctioned by the DOE that are using the direct assessment model that is completely disconnected from credit hours and seat time. But those are just that, experimental models. And we hope that as the next couple of years go by and we have more data and information from these experimental programs, that the DOE will get on board and allow us a little more latitude in terms of granting financial aid to students in competency-based programs.
Makes sense. And what about credentialing? Does credentialing look a little bit different in competency-based education? Are there still grades, or is it portfolios, or kind of how is that measured or tracked?
Yes, and yes, and yes, all of the above. So again, a competency-based curriculum can look a number of ways, and whether you are, perhaps at the baccalaureate level, giving students what we would call a micro-credential or a badge for a discrete package of content that they have demonstrated mastery of versus a course. This can be reflected in, again, badging and small credentials that the students awarded. It can be reflected in a narrative type transcript that can be then provided to employers to demonstrate the competencies that the student has achieved and so on. But again, because this is relatively new in terms of thinking outside of the box for credentialing, you'll see a variety of different credentials being awarded. Whether those are, accepted by employers is an important part of the process. And so part of this, when we're talking about designing competency-based education programs, is surveying your external stakeholders and your employers and your people working in whatever professional field you're training students in, finding out what their needs are, and then coming to an agreement about your curriculum such that when a student leaves your program, regardless of what the content was, this credential means something to the workforce.
One of the things that's been critical as we do our thinking and planning here is our licensing boards and how they might view a transcript that doesn't include a GPA, but includes artifacts that demonstrate competency. And certainly right now they'd be challenged by that idea, but over the next probably 12 to 18 to 24 months, they're going to find that there are a number of institutions that have started to approach a transcript in more of a portfolio way than a traditional GPA course-based document.
All right, great. Well, let's take a little bit of a break, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit about kind of how competency-based education lends itself pretty well to healthcare, and then what AT Still's competency-based initiative is going to be. So let's take a little bit of a break, and we're going to do a little bit on phishing in preparation for Dustin's session later on.
Are bad guys phishing for you? Just one bad click could get you caught. Learn how to spot a phishing attack, and you can avoid getting hooked. Phishing is when cybercriminals impersonate trusted companies to trick people into revealing personal and financial information. They use fake emails, text messages, social media, and more. You can protect yourself from phishing by following a few simple tips. Always make sure a sender's email address matches their official website address. Watch for spelling errors and bad grammar, common signs that a message is fake. Be wary of emails that use generic titles, such as valued customer, instead of your name. Double-check URLs in emails and text messages before you click. Ignore any email that asks you for personal or financial information. Before entering information on even the most trusted websites, check the browser window for the lock symbol and HTTPS. The S stands for secure. Install comprehensive security software on all your devices to identify and block phishing scams. When you recognize phishing, you leave cybercriminals high and dry.
All right, we're back, and it sounds like we've got a couple of comments, questions from our listeners, viewers out there in chat world.
Yeah, you know, a few people watch these things.
I know.
I don't know if you
nice.
noticed that. It's pretty cool. So I've got one here, and Ted and Danielle, it's directed to both of you. So, however, whichever one of you wants to answer here, it says, we've been at the HLC meeting all week where CBE was discussed. Seems to be more recognized by HLC in years past. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is that there are a really incredible dynamic group of individuals who are advocating for this model on a number of levels and are very active both in informing policy decision makers and so on. And so there's a lot of support behind this. I think we've seen an exponential growth in the number of programs that are implementing curricula that in some capacity include a competency-based component.
Yeah, certainly if you read the literature, it seems like there's a lot more about competency-based education within the broader realm of education.
You know, that sounds like a dean that's living it up in Chicago. That,
I wondered if there might be too much personally identifiable information.
You shall remain nameless.
That's right. And I'll just tell you the follow-up to this is he mentions that DOE is sort of relying on regional accreditors to ensure quality student assessment standards.
One of the things that I think about all the time is not just reaching out for a fad. And we've seen fads come through education, and it's important that we understand the difference, or at least we identify strategies that we think do the best educating our students. And I think the interest that you see out there is because a number of schools recognize that we're no longer bound by a classroom or a physical facility and paper. We're bound. We have technology. We can use technology, and it significantly improves the education we deliver to students, and particularly health professional students. And I often use the example. If I'm going to a dentist, I would rather know that that dentist has demonstrated their ability to fill a cavity to somebody than circle the right answer on an examination about how to fill a cavity.
Sure.
And that's a little hyperbolic. I'm sorry, it's sort of on the edge, but that's really the difference here is that demonstrating knowledge, skills, and ability in a meaningful way it is the heart of competency-based education, and I think it's important in health professions education.
And doesn't health professions lend itself a little bit more closely to competency-based education for exactly those reasons? It's a hands-on art as well as science.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And competency and competency-based education aren't new to medical education. This is something that has been advocated for and policy developed around for several decades. The AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, has been a proponent of competency-based education. The ACGME, Graduate Medical Education, has developed competencies for residents and so on. So this isn't a new concept. And I would go as far as to say, we're already doing part of this in our health professions training. I don't know of any health professions program, particularly our internal programs, that doesn't do some component of actual skills assessment or assessing of the student in a simulated environment where we're not only looking at their actual psychomotor skills, but also their ability to apply knowledge, to be critical thinkers, and to interact with patients. So, as we're looking as an educational community to be not only innovative and take advantage of all the technology that we have at our fingertips, we also think about things like how can decreasing barriers to medical education serve our communities and our country. If we think about the significant deficit we have providing healthcare and how we can move students through health professions training programs, while allowing them to still maintain a component of their lifestyle, i.e. we're allowing them to engage with this content at a distance and allowing them to do it at their own pace and so on. If we decrease those barriers to these educational programs, we can, in theory, hopefully pipeline these students through our programs a bit faster and again, meet the needs of the healthcare community.
And doesn't it also recognize that many of our students come with, some previous professional experience, and we can kind of recognize that in our programs a little bit maybe easier than a traditional undergraduate institution?
Absolutely. I think, and that's one of the really neat things I think about this idea is in PA education in particular, our students run the gamut from, those who have worked in the business realm but had a significant amount of volunteer experience, or people who have actually worked in health professions as nurses or techs and so on. And so we recognize that these students are at different places and have a variety of experiences, and competency-based education, which respects those experiences and allows students to move quickly through content that they're already familiar with and able to demonstrate competency in, really goes quite a ways towards being learner-centered, and that we're going to give you a package, so to speak, of expectations and activities that will help you to meet those expectations. But if you already have that skill set, we're not particularly interested in how you get there. It's not the journey that we're interested in competency-based education, it's the outcome and assessing that outcome.
Is there a role then for measuring quality, or how is quality kind of determined in competency-based education? It seems like if the goal is to get everyone competent, then where does proficiency or even mastery kind of fall in?
That's where assessment is critical. And I think of all of the components of competency-based education, development of the summative assessments is a huge job. And it takes a variety of subject matter experts coming to some degree of consensus on what is the definition of mastery for whatever you're looking at, whether it's an area of medicine, in our case, in the PA program, psychiatry, or an actual skill. So soliciting input from your subject matter experts in the development of these assessments is the most important part of this, because if we're saying the journey is not as important as the outcome, if we're saying that you can get to this assessment any way you like as long as you're able to demonstrate competency, then it's critical that that assessment is truly a measure of mastery. And it's no easy task. I will tell you that. I've learned that the hard way over the last few months.
And we've had a lot of discussions about how you grade competency, and can you be minimally competent or have excellent proficiency, and at least in our discussions at this point, we focused on the fact that somebody either has competency or does not have competency, and it's more of a pass-fail mentality. But we think, at least at this stage, it recognizes our ability to create this kind of an assessment tool. And I think it says to employers and licensing board, this is an expectation that you can have of somebody that's graduated from this program.
So tell us a little bit about the first program that we have kind of focusing on this, the behavioral health and psychiatry program.
Sure. So within the Arizona School of Health Sciences and the Department of Physician Assistant Studies, we have been in the process of developing a postgraduate certificate in psychiatry and behavioral health. This program is targeted to practicing physician assistants, so our students must have at least 1 year of clinical practice experience before entering into the program. With the help of a group of subject matter experts and faculty, we designed 15 competencies, which, for the sake of understanding the program structure, may be easier to think of as courses, but of course we're trying to get away from that terminology. So these 15 competencies are inclusive of over 80 subcompetencies, and these subcompetencies are then further arranged into domains, and within these domains we have ethical and legal components, patient education, patient management, and so on. And so we're really ensuring that all of our content maps back to not only the outcomes that we're looking for within this program, but the assessments that we've designed. This program is projected to take the student between 12 and 24 months. Again, this is a self-paced program. We haven't yet run our pilot studies, so how much time students will take on the average is kind of an unknown at this point, but we have a plan in place for running some beta groups through here in the next few months to get some more information about that. But we think it will take between 12 and 24 months. It's completely online. We're working with a company called Flat World Knowledge, who has provided us both with instructional design services to help our subject matter experts design these competencies consistent with the CBE model. And they also provide the online platform that the student engages with, both for obtaining and moving through the learning activities and engaging in the assessments. When we sat down with this group of folks to develop these competencies, we had a couple of things in mind. One was based on feedback from the subject matter experts, what skills do these students need to possess at the end to be considered competent in the area of psychiatry and behavioral health? In addition to that, we looked at the National PA certifying body, the NCCPA's list of competencies for what's called the Certificate of Added Qualification. So this is a nationally recognized credential in addition to the standard PA credential for those who have worked for a period of time in psychiatry, demonstrated a number of things, and written a robust exam. So we're hoping that by completing our certificate program, these students then will be well positioned to continue on with their pursuit of this Certificate of Valid Qualifications if they choose to do so. If they choose not to do so and their objective is to simply augment their own skill set to bring more to their practice and their patients, that's fine as well. Students do not have to complete the entire certificate program. They can select from a menu of these 15 competencies and complete individual competencies if that's an area where they're hoping to get additional practice and again, augment their knowledge base.
Excellent. Sounds exciting. Timing-wise, what is kind of the timing or thoughts on timing?
Well, we're going to start that beta test group here in the next few weeks, and we'll be doing a sequential rollout of the content as we build it. It takes quite a bit of time and effort on the behalf of our faculty to put these competencies together. And so we should start seeing students engaging with the platform and working through these competencies in June. We'll open this up later this summer for actual enrollees once we've had the opportunity to analyze the beta pilot data and adjust the curriculum or the assessments as needed. So we're super excited. Ted and I are going to be advertising this, putting the word out there at our AAPA Association meeting in just a couple of weeks here in San Antonio. We're offering a free continuing education module that's somewhat of a try before you buy. So that we can allow people to experience the platform and experience competency-based education and get them excited about this program.
You know, Brian, to kind of bring this all around to the future that we see, we've spent a lot of time developing this certificate. We've done it for a number of reasons. One, we should mention that it's HLC approved. We've gotten approval from the Higher Learning Commission to offer this certificate. We've spent a lot of time developing the back end so that we can collect data, so that we can go to HLC and the Department of Education and demonstrate how a really good program is run. We can show them the statistics about how our students interact, how our instructors interact. So we've taken a lot of time we've taken a good amount of time to get this certificate ready, but we're also laying the foundation for future programs. And we see the opportunity for all of our programs to get involved with competency-based education. As we said before, we do competency-based education in a lot of our programs. We just don't actually define it that way at this point. But we'd certainly like to think about future programs that might roll out that are entirely competency-based. And with the certificate program, we believe that we're establishing the foundation we need to do that.
Excellent. Let's wrap it up there and kind of shift gears into security a little bit. But first, thanks, Dr. Wendel. Thanks, Dr. Kempton. Really appreciate it.
Did we get to go fishing with Dustin?
You know, I'm sitting here thinking, I remember all those classes where I'm like, can I just take the test and be done? This is, I think I remember, I know where CBE came from. I know exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
The source. Thanks, guys. And you're welcome to stay and go fishing. But I thought I drew like the long straw on this deal today. I'm like, let me see. Acronym alphabet soup or fishing. I'm in for fishing. And so then Dustin showed up and clarified that for me. It's not the kind of fishing we're talking about.
Not the kind Ted was referring to.
I don't think so. It's not so much a pole in a pond as it is like a Nigerian prince and a computer is the way that works out. Right, Dustin? Clarify for us what we're talking about here with phishing.
Yes, sir. So yeah, actually the Federal Trade Commission defines it as when an internet fraudster impersonates a business to trick you into giving out your personal information.
They use the term fraudster.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible.
So basically it's the activity of defrauding an online account of any personal information by posing as a legitimate company.
Okay, that already sounds way less fun. By the way, I didn't get to introduce you fully. Dustin Usher. Actually, Dustin, I'm just looking here. I don't even have your credentials on this thing. So tell us why you know so much about phishing. Oh, there it is. Network security analyst. That sounds perfect.
I'm the network security analyst here at ATSU, and I'll actually be finishing up my master's here in May. So.
Ah, very cool. So why is phishing even a deal? Why are we talking about it?
Well, actually, it's probably the most prevalent way that bad actors compromise networks and organizations, because they get people to fall for these emails that they send out. And basically, if you want, I can give you a little information about how the attack works if you want me to do that.
I would love for that, because I think every now and then I see an email from someone. Is it Gene maybe, or somebody that says, hey, here's the latest. And sometimes that's clear. Sometimes I'm not real sure what's going on. So yeah, whatever
Yeah.
However, you can help us clarify what those are.
And Dustin, you can probably help, but I would bet that we get 1 to 2 of these at least a week. So it's pretty
insane.
prevalent.
Easily.
Yeah, so walk us through it.
So basically how it happens is you have a bad actor, and what they'll start off with some reconnaissance of an organization, and they'll use their website, the organization's website. They'll use the social media websites, and they will farm and gather as much data as they can about this organization to see how they formulate their email IDs. And after they do that and have this information, they may use what's called a botnet, which is basically a network of computers that are under their control. So they have this plethora of resources they can use to send out these emails. And then they have the link inside that email that the user will click on, either give their social security or login information, and then they'll gather all this information in an automated way, so they can attack multiple organizations.
And see,
that's basically how the attack works.
That gives me anxiety, because you just said there's a guy with an army of robot computers, right? And so we've gone straight into Marvel's next offering on the big screen. And so I think, oh my gosh, there's nothing we can do. But I think actually some of the best ways to protect yourself are the most obvious and simple, right? You mentioned something about a link inside the email.
Exactly. So what will happen is the email itself, first of all, may contain misspellings. It'll have, like, maybe, for example, a Wells Fargo email may come to you with their logo, with some misspellings, and a link saying, it's the alert mindset. Oh, your account's been compromised. Please click this link and change your password. So right away, once you do that, they may take you to a site that looks, just like the site, because there's tools out there that can actually copy over the foundation web pages and mimic that site, and it'll look just like it, and then you'll put in information, and then they have your account info then.
So let's say they get smarter. I mean, and I think I was just reading my notes. I know we've got 3 of these sessions, and so I don't want to jump into content that you want to cover for the next session. But what's the like top 2 or 3 things? Like, I get one of these emails. Let's say there's not misspellings. So I got an email and it looks like it may or may not be legit. I think your advice, first of all, would be don't just click on a link and start entering personal information, right?
Right, exactly. Because usually you're not going to get an email like this from a reputable company. They're not going to tell you to click this link, and give some personal information and login information, social security. They're just not going to do that. You know what I mean? You're going to have to call the company yourself, which is probably the best thing to do, and figure out if it's, legitimate or not. And there's ways to recognize that as well.
Right. And I think another sort of, am I getting into the next session a little bit?
I think this is fine. I think we want to give them a kind of a brief understanding of what phishing is and some of the tools that they can use,
right,
or thought processes to protect.
So it's good to know that these email attempts are happening often.
Correct.
And so you can't be overly vigilant about making sure you read the email thoroughly. And then a couple of the basic things that we can do for protection is make sure you verify with the company if they request any information through an email, which they aren't typically going to do. That should throw up a red flag immediately. And the other sort of helpful thing I've heard is go to the company's site the way you normally do. Don't use a link within an email, but visit the site the way you would normally visit and log in if you feel like you need to change personal information associated with your account, right? And then the third thing is let our ITS department know, because that's how we get those warning emails, and you guys are able to actually set up some protections for us once we know that that's happening. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. And basically that's what it is. If you see a suspicious email or you get one, the best thing to do is just to contact us right away so we can investigate it, and definitely don't click on any links, but we should be able to take care of that, no problem.
Cool. Well, this isn't nearly as fun as the sort of phishing I thought we were going to do, Dustin. But even though I'm a little dejected, I'm happy to give you the last word. So don't leave us freaked out. Are we safe? We've got our marching orders. Make sure and let you know. Any other final thoughts on phishing for this session?
Yeah, basically it's going to come down to awareness. I mean, if you're suspicious at all, that should be an alert to let us know what's going on. You don't feel right about it. And definitely emails that ask for some kind of PII or personal identifiable information, you want to let us know, because usually they're not going to be asking for that.
So if it smells fishy, it might be fishy.
Oh. Who knew this guy was going to bring the humor at the end? That was fantastic.
Yeah, my kids wouldn't qualify that as humor.
Like dad joke.
It's dad
joke. Cool. Well, Dustin, thanks for taking some time with us. I know we're going to do a couple more of these sessions, and so we'll encourage our viewers today and over the next several weeks as they watch the recording to join us again for the next Lunch and Learn. So, because this is an important topic. It sounds like one that we're confronting often, and it's best to be equipped and well informed.
That's great. Thanks for sticking with us today on competency-based education and phishing. We're going to come back in a couple weeks, kind of keeping the same topic of education, broad topic, but rather than talking about competency-based, we're going to talk about continuing education and lifetime learning. So I think Joe and I are going to have a little conversation about using lynda.com and some of the tools there. And then we're also going to have Jan Baum, our Director of Continuing Education, on to talk a little bit about education kind of after the degrees and kind of what happens for lifelong education. So stick with us. That'll be in a couple of weeks. I believe it's May 17th. And then we'll be back with Dustin again to talk a little bit more on phishing as well. So thank you much. Appreciate it.